Hey, welcome back everyone to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 215, Black Tech Talk. I'm here with my co-facilitator Lionel.
Hello, everyone. How you doing today? How you doing today, Mike?
I'm good, brother. Yourself?
I am well.
All right. Please click the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible, and there's a docket in the description beneath the video for you to follow along with. Rodney Holmes, what's going on? Complex Design, what's going on? Um, all right, so just let me just preface this. I know you people are going to come in. I see them coming in now. So, all right, just so I can preface this. So there's been a lot of discussion the last week and a half about space, black people doing space exploration and asteroid mining. Now, how this conversation came about was it happened on Reg the Bad Guy, and then it went over to King Sigma, and the discussion basically ensued. Um, Asteroid mining being profitable, and there's been a lot of pushback and discern about the idea of asteroid mining and black space exploration. What I was trying to convene over there was that, or trying to convey over there was that, basically, this is a very lucrative, profitable industry to actually get into, and it's a part of the fourth industrialization of the coming future. And this is something that's going to be around the next 150 to 200 years. So this is that 200-year game plan that's going to far exceed our lives and our kids' lives and grandkids' lives. So you're talking about 20 generations of development that can be ensued from this. And the pushback that I get from certain people, I find it particularly interesting because um, there are these doubts that somehow, some way, this can't be done, or if it can be done, um, you need experts to do it, and that's not necessarily the case. Uh, we've covered several hangouts, general hangouts on space and technology, covering a lot of the news around this sort of thing, and we've also did deep dives on this on Black Tech Talk Saturdays. What I'm going to do tonight is kind of revisit a lot of what we talked about on the deep dives and some of the general discussions on our Space and Technology Monday hangouts. So with that being said, I just wanted to preface that, preface the hangout with that. Hey, Rodney Holmes, what's going on? So um, let me get started sharing my screen. What I've done so far is I copied the deep dive dockets from the previous hangouts, which is one based on Cube satellite development and Raspberry Pis, as well as amateur rocketry um, from our previous hangout. So let me share my screen, and we can kind of float through the docket and then open it up for discussion. All right, so first item on the docket is from CubeSat.org. So what is a CubeSat, as it says in the docket? So cube-based satellites are defined by various various sizes. So it goes from 1U to 3U and up to 6U um, in design. So 1U will equal is the equivalent of 1 unit. Um, 6U is equivalent of 6 1U units. So that makes up the proportion of uh, the size and design. So this is just a website based on CubeSat.org. So cube-based satellites. Um, and what we're looking at right now is basically some of these summits that are around Cube-based satellite workshops and stuff like that. You see it's in Milan, Italy. The other one is in Barcelona. This other one is a Spanish forum in outside of Madrid, and you also have a Chinese one that happened last year. So why am I bringing this up, and why are we bringing this up right now? Let me see if I can open up the specification. This is an image of a cube-based satellite. So these are 6 CubeSats in their container. A container holds a satellite. So a cube-based satellite is like the size of probably the size of a Nintendo GameCube, or even a Google Home, uh, um, personal assistant, or Amazon Alexa. And what these satellites are capable of doing is basically they have one single job to do, which is to communicate um, satellite communications back down to Earth for planetary reasons. They could be used for a variety of reasons, but but the most focus is always single job use. That's how you kind of reduce the amount of workload onto a small satellite like that. So usually, if you're going to have a satellite of this caliber working, you only want it doing one thing at a time. You don't want it to do multiple things at a time, because what happens if it does multiple things at a time, it usually doesn't do it right. So make it do one thing and make it do one thing right, and that's the whole purpose behind it. DE Raptor, what's going on? So let me. So if you want to follow along, you can always go into the docket and pull up these. Pull up these links. I know you have anything you want to add about Cube-based satellites.
Yeah, the only thing I add is they're an affordable way for people to launch a satellite into space to focus on the things they want to get done. Now they don't have to, with the reusable rockets of SpaceX. It it decreases the cost to go into space, because when you're lifting up, for every pound that you shoot into space, it takes about no less than $10,000, because you have to overcome that gravity. So with these smaller cube-based satellites, it costs less, because with the more weight, you have to pay more. And now with reusable rockets, that price point comes down even more. So now you have a situation where it's within reach relative to it was before, for people to create a um, small satellite, define what it's going to be used for, and launch it to space.
Yeah. So I'm on the second item on the docket, which is basically Australia's cube-based satellite revolution. And the article I'm just about to read is just basically a synopsis of what they're working on. Because of their low cost and versatility, these tiny satellites are great for research. So I mentioned that earlier about its purposes. Last year, the CISRO started building their own cube satellites with a suite of infrared sensors called CISRO Sat. The data collected will be available for tracking fires and studying the formation of clouds and tropical cyclones. But CubeSats aren't only good for research. Miriota is uh, an Adelaide company using CubeSat technology as a remote monitoring solution. Their sensors communicate with orbiting CubeSats every 90 minutes, sending data to phone or computer. This helps their customers stay up to up to date on things like location data, water levels, and pump pressure on remote sites. The Australian Space Agency has governed the launch of Cube satellites in Australia since it was set up in 2018. So this is only last year. Only a few months after ASA's formation, Australian Space Activities Act received a major amendment making it easier for small companies to launch satellites in Australia. Deputy head Deputy head of the ASA, Anthony Murfitt, says Australia plays an important role in the international space industry. And it all comes down to our ability to track satellites in the southern hemisphere. We've got a wonderful location in the southern hemisphere, says Anthony. There are more objects in space, and people need to access that information, which means ground stations to communicate with CubeSats. We can use imaging technology and space situational awareness to monitor what's in orbit. So this is a picture of one of the advanced cube satellites that they have designed. So for Mars, most CubeSats can be found in low Earth orbit, LEO, which is an area of 160 to 2,000 kilometers above the Earth's surface. However, some CubeSats find themselves a long way from home. NASA's InSight's mission to Mars is the first time we've focused on the red planet's deep interior. When InSight pulled into orbit, it brought two CubeSats along for the historic ride, helping to communicate back to Earth. Called Marcos, the 6-unit CubeSats measure only a few centimeters, yet they've been communicating across the 200 million kilometer divide between the planets. The Marcos CubeSats have been proven it's not the size of the satellite that counts, but how you use it. So I mentioned this earlier about the usage of it, the application aspect of it. Usually, you only want to use it for one purpose and one purpose only. You don't want it to do multiple things at a time because it's not really a multi-purpose satellite. It's really just an application-specific satellite. Um, oh, there's one more thing I wanted to get to. Share my screen one more time. The ups and downs of Perth space startups. Stewart and Conrad's PicoSat is seriously tiny, measuring just 5 centimeters aside. And because getting stuff into space is expensive, the smaller you can make a satellite, the bigger your edge can be. So this is a picture of a Pico satellite. So this is smaller than even a cube-based satellite. So this is relatively new stuff. So if we got a little satellite, we're going to put it up in space, and it'll beam home pictures of Australia on the amateur radio band to a receiver that we're building, and we'll be able to look at pictures of Australia from space, says Conrad. The pair of the pair are currently working on their first prototype using off-the-shelf components, but the long-term plan is more ambitious. PicoSat Systems wants to be a one-stop shop for businesses looking for satellites on the cheap. So if we got this little satellite, we're going to put it up into space, and it'll beam home pictures of Australia on the amateur radio band to a receiver that we're building, and we're able to look at pictures of Australia from space. Um, Putting stuff into space is quite challenging. Not only do you need to build that satellite, you need to test it, get it certified by the people who own the rocket, make sure you've got launch insurance, and get government sign off. We take care of all that for you. Then you have the solution, and you don't need to worry about all the bits and pieces in between. PicoSat reckons uh, WA to WA is a great place to be to be when it comes to when it comes to space. We've got ground stations and the skills, but perhaps more importantly, we've got customers. There's a huge number of businesses in Washington that rely on satellites to do their job. As far as we know, we are the first small satellite solutions provider in Western Australia. I'm sorry, I said WA as Washington, but it actually should be Western Australia. Why they abbreviated it to be that way, I have no idea. If you spin this around, you'll find another West Australian space startup trying to solve the opposite problem, bringing things from space back down to Earth. I had the scientific background and design knowledge, and I've always been a space nut, says Mike Lee Page, founder of Exodus Space Systems. Inspired by films like 2001 A Space Odyssey, Mike set his sights on trying to recreate the iconic spinning space station. Exodus is a solution to the problems I saw with the people trying to build spin gravity. We're trying to build much smaller craft that also spin, but we're going to use that spin motion to address a different problem: space debris. So I don't want to go into too much of this, but actually let me read this one part. Debris tend to stay in space because there is no air resistance to slow it down. While there are several projects out there that are trying to clean up space, Exodus has a plan to turn that space trash into Earth cash. We clear out specific regions of space where there are a lot of satellites operating, and if you've got a satellite up there, there's value in that. Exodus spinning satellite will deploy a small amount of gas in the regions they are paid to patrol, almost like pockets of atmosphere. These pockets of atmosphere cause any debris caught in their bubble to slow down and fall out of orbit. We think of it as a preemptive satellite insurance, says Mike. And Western Australia is the perfect place to do it. We've we're kind of the experts in the whole debris of tracking things. Space is no longer something you got to go overseas to get involved in. Mike says we are right where we want to be. So I wanted to cover this because I thought it was very important. None of these guys or none of these people who are involved in this actually have a extensive space background. They had an idea, they had the technical um, wherewithal, some tenacity, did a little bit of research, probably did some Wikipedia, probably looked in their local library, probably pulled everything up off of Google, and they formed this startup. These are two different startups. I bring all this up so that people can understand that the discussions that's been had over the last 10 days about the impossibility of black people getting into the space arena or space exploration and planetary science is not that far fetched. This is happening right now in real time. I just read two startups. One in every three startup is going to be a space startup going forward. What more can I say about this? Lionel, please jump in.
Yeah, I think what it is that a lot of this is insurmountable to people to comprehend. Um, the technology is going fast, so to say that asteroid mining is on our horizon, people are looking into it. You have people building these small satellites to launch into space. A lot of people don't even know that we've, SpaceX have the rockets that land themselves. A lot of people don't even know that. So you're starting to see a technological know. People, the people that know what's going on, they're starting to spread more. And you don't necessarily have to go out to the asteroid belt to mine asteroids. You can mine some of these asteroids that come into low Earth orbit. I'm sure you all heard of the Schumacher asteroid. That's visible from the sky from the naked eye. These are things that come in low Earth orbit, and they are valuable. What people don't understand, to give a little context and basics, these asteroids. I know people hear and see a lot of movies of, oh, don't go out there. We don't know what's out there. It's more of a boogeyman, scary thing. But what you have to understand is this solar system, the planets, especially the inner planets, are made up of some of the same materials. And I keep beating this drum because it's true. Um, a lot of the materials that make up planet Earth can be found on Mercury, Venus, Mars, and that asteroid belt. All asteroids are rocks that did not get the opportunity to form into a planet. We talked on our space and technology video of how there was a celestial object that smashed into Earth and it spawned the moon. That means the moon is made up of some of the same materials. A lot of these asteroids are categorized into three broad classes, which is C type, S type, and M type. And I'm reading this from NASA. So you don't have to say, oh, he's talking crap. This is from NASA. C type or chondrite asteroids are most common. They're most common. Probably consist of clay and silicate rocks and are dark in appearance. They are among the most ancient objects in the solar system. S types, which are stony, are made up of silicate materials and nickel iron. We have nickel iron on Earth. M types are metallic nickel iron. The asteroids comp- excuse me, compositional difference are related to how far from the sun they are formed. Um, some experience high temperatures after they form and partly melted, with iron sinking to the center and forcing ballistic volcanic lava to the surface. So these things have materials. They have a lot of them have um, ice water on them. The molecules that make up water, you can split them. Now you have rocket fuel and oxygen. These things are very useful. They produce a profit when you once you catch them. The profit that they produce is so overwhelming that now people cannot comprehend the numbers. We're beginning to be a species that's going to venture out into space more and more. So that I think a lot of people can't comprehend.
De, do you have anything you want to add to this? And how you doing, brother?
I'm all right. How you doing, Mike? Linnell? Um, this satellite that they're creating now, as the technology changes, individuals, it looks like the way things are going, individuals will be able to put their own satellites into space. You'll be able to use your satellite like you're using your cell phone right now. That's what I'm coming to see. You'll be able to explore. You'll be able to see what your satellite is doing in space. You can put one in space and explore any planet in any part of our galaxy or our solar system.
Exactly. Let me get to this next article. Looking for rocket science in unexpected places. You don't have to leave Australia to be a rocket science. In fact, you don't. You might not even have to leave your job. Your local mining company, yep, regular old Woodside, has been quietly backing researchers from Monash University and a 3D printing company called Amarel as they work on the rocket engine that could bring people back from Mars. Under the code name Project X, they've been working on a 3D printed methane fueled aerospike rocket engine. That's a little bit of a mouthful, so let's dig into exactly what that means and why it's so cool. At this point, you've probably heard of 3D printing. You might even have seen a printer in action, but this kind of printer pushes 3D printing to its limits. Rather than layering, hot plastic filament parts can be reprinted by melting layers of metal powder together with a laser. Now that the technology is maturing, parts printed in this way are getting surprisingly strong. In fact, 3D printed parts are now getting so strong that they can withstand massive temperatures and pressures. Temperatures and pressures that you might encounter when harvesting natural gas from thousands of meters below the ground surface, or perhaps when sending a rocket into space. Not only are they strong, they are quick to make. With 3D printed parts, we can finally start to experiment with designs and materials for rocket engines that we couldn't make before. One of those is the aerospike design the Project X team are using. Rockets need to keep their thrust pointed at the ground to move upwards. Traditional rockets have a uh, shaped bit of a metal at the bottom of the engine to keep that jet for a fire moving in the right direction or the right way. If you've ever watched the rocket launch, you probably recognize it. It's a, it's the bit of it's the bit at the bottom that looks kind of like a bell. Aerospikes don't have those metal bits. They have a pointy uh, plug plug like shape instead. So what you see on the right is a aerospike, and what you see on the left is the traditional bell shaped um, directional. Anyways, I don't want to read too much into this because it's basically what they're talking about doing is creating their own rockets from scratch using 3D printing. We talked about this the past 10 days about well how can black people build their own rocket? Well, you can 3D print it for one, like everybody else is doing. Do we have access to a 3D printer? Sure, you can buy 3D printers online or at Micro Center or some of these big electronic shops. Wouldn't cost you that much. I know you have anything you want to add about rocketry, 3D printed rockets?
Yeah, I agree. We went over a number of times about this. We went over how there's one industry printing rockets out of metal, relativity rockets. Other the material that's going to be available is going to be stronger as time goes. Going to be stronger, and that material is going to be available for 3D printing. A lot of people, what happens is a lot of people look at the technology now and say, well, you can't do that because we don't have it. Technology advances. Technology, each iteration becomes better and better. So what you're looking at now is not the end all be all that technology. It's going to get better in order for us to do these things at a cheaper cost. We already see case in point with again SpaceX landing though their rockets making entry to space cheaper. That was a technological iteration.
All right, let me get to this next article. Let me get to this next article real quick. Jobs of the future, astronaut trainer. Thinking about what you want to be when you grow up or planning your next career change? How about a civil astronaut trainer? Who didn't dream of being an astronaut when they were a kid? And yet to date, only 536 humans have been to space. And we enter the age of commercial space travel. This universal dream can soon be a reality. In December, Virgin Galactic's VSS Unity reached the edge of space for the first time, taking the company one step closer to offering commercial space travel. When tickets currently priced around $250,000 to help fund the huge startup costs, it's not for everyone. But Virgin has said once flights begin, the cost will come down, making the trip accessible to more people. Several Australians have already booked their seats and will be proud to know the ship they are flying on has a connection to home. The builder of VSS Unity, spaceship company, is currently led by Perth-born and UWA educated Enrico Palermo. So what they're talking about now is basically a future that there's a lot of opportunity that's going to come out of some of the space exploration and astronaut trainers, all types of gear, right? You're not going to go up there in your true religions, that's for sure. You're going to have a different type of suit to go up there with. So a lot of this is starting to come into play, and I don't think a lot of black people who were listening to this 10 days ago on these different hangouts really understand the significance of what we're talking about here, and the impact it's going to have in terms of job creation.
Yeah, job creation is going to come out of this because this is not something where you're going to do for the next couple of years. This is a continuation for hundreds of years because now you're once you get out there at a consistent rate, now the whole door is blown off the hinges because now you have a way to consistently get these materials out there. You're going to need to hire people to do certain things. This is wow. And the people that understand this, that can see the bleeding edge and the future that are up on what's going on, like us, like brain trust, they see this and they say, well, we know this person is doing. We know that company is doing that. We know they already know how much this stuff is, and we're able to connect the dots, and we're connecting the dots for you all. Well, something's going to happen. Let me be a part of this.
Hmm. Go ahead, D.
Well, one of the things that happens in when technology changes is that the people who develop the technology, the generation that developed a technology, doesn't normally get most of the use of it. It's the next generation, and the next generation that comes along going to take this space technology this platform that we're using now for space technology, and build on it. They're the ones who are going to be, like you said, the astronauts and the astronaut trainers. Right now, the we are doing everything from planet Earth, but the next generation, say, I don't know, 2050 or so, 2035 even, it could be 20 years down the road, are going to, some of them will be living out there. Just like how we send astronauts out to the space station now, you know, and you see that the part that China is China now is coming into the space age, to its space age. And the first thing it did is send a rocket to the far side of the moon, whereas nobody else used to do that before. Now Africa coming along, they're saying that they're working on Africa 63, which by 63 Africa should be developed to a stage where it's employing its own people. From between now and 63, you're going to have a generation of Africans that are going to be not thinking of just how to make a cell phone or how to make a satellite, but how to operate in the space between here and Mars or on Mars. So it would behoove a lot of young black men here in America, the ones that you're trying to talk to get in on that. Because if Africa, like I said before, if Africa takes the lead It's like America now doesn't negotiate with China on behalf of young black men in America. They say they negotiate on behalf of Americans, but it's not really on behalf of young black men in America. When Brazil negotiates, it's not on the people. It's not negotiating on behalf of the people in the favela. Or when England negotiates with somebody, it's not on behalf of the people in Brixton. So we have to pick up that mantle, and we got to work, um, be a part of that this new generation of the new astronauts and astronauts trainer and people who are going to live out there. Our children have to do that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So thank you for that. Let me just jump to this next one from GeekWire.com that's on the docket. After satellite flap, Swarm Technology raises $25 million for space-based IoT network. A year after making a $900,000 mistake, Swarm Technologies is raking in $25 million in funding round aimed at getting a constellation of sandwich-sized satellites up and running for the Internet of Things. Getting the constellation in orbit could open up a big frontier for tiny satellites within the next year and a half. We're just excited to get launched and get our network up there and start offering global, affordable internet," said Swarm CEO Sarah Spingello, a veteran of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and Alphabet X's Moonshot Factory. The satellites, known as space BEEs, are so small that the Federal Communications Commission turned down the Silicon Valley startup's application for a launch license in last January. The mission went ahead anyways, largely because satellite-based spaceflight, the company that was taking care of the logistics for liftoff abroad in Indian PSLV rocket, didn't know Swarm's application had been rejected. Last month, Swarm agreed to pay the FCC's hefty fine, submit to closer oversight for the next 3 years, and draw up a detailed plan for compliance with the agency's rules. It's public. It's probably sufficient to say we take all compliance issues very seriously. The FCC swatted down Swarm's initial application because regulators worry that the 4 by 4 by 1 inch space BEE, with BEE standing for Basic Electronic Element, couldn't be tracked by authorities. If that's if that were the case, it would heighten the risk of collision and damage to unsuspecting spacecraft in low Earth orbit (LEO). Swarm has equipped its space BEEs with radar reflectors to make them more detectable, and ran trackability tests in orbit. The fact that these tests proceeded even though the satellites were unlicensed initially added to the FCC's IRI, but Spengelo said the resulting radar readings picked up by NORAD and the space tracking startup called Leo Labs could persuade the FCC to approve future space BEEs. All of that data is super supportive towards the case that they are trackable. Recently, we had some great meetings with the FCC, and we've gotten positive indications that that argument is sound. To advance the program while Swarm resolved its space BEE issues, the company worked with Spaceflight to get three 4 by 4 by 4 inch satellites as big as a tissue box rather than a sandwich, launched on a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket last month. Spengelo is hoping that the sandwich-sized satellites will be cleared for liftoff in the time for Swarm's next launch, tentatively planned for sometime in the spring. Because of the delays caused by the partial government shutdown, we're unclear on the status. So I can't really comment on that much more than that. Swarm's plan calls for putting 150 space BEEs into low Earth orbit within the next 18 months to provide round the world data connectivity. Even with one of 5 or 30 satellites, we can start to offer services, particularly for applications that don't constantly need a satellite overhead. So basically, what's happening here is that they've developed they developed these satellites that as she's holding it in her hand, you can see it in the picture right here. Basically, not that much bigger than not that much bigger than a cell phone, and this is able to broadcast internet. So people are working on this stuff actively as we speak. I know you have anything you want to add to this?
That's outstanding. So now we're seeing more and more that the technology is available. It's being built. We just don't hear about it because we just don't talk about it widely enough. It's being built. You see it's happening. Um, Now you can purchase one of those satellites, program it to what you want it to do, see how much it costs to launch it. It's starting to become that simple
Hmm.
compared to cell phones when they first came out years ago. They're not like they are now on the verge of being able to download a H ultra HD movie in public on the street in less than 30 seconds.
Hmm.
That was unimaginable in the early 2000s, late 90s. Now you see this. Wow.
Hmm. Go ahead, D.
Um, when I read that article, the first thing that hit me is that the FCC is going after this individual company, and I'm reminded of the space race began between superpowers, and then it went to like nations, India, Brazil, France, Germany, England. They started putting up satellites. Now it's getting to an individual thing, and the gatekeepers want to keep control of space as long as possible. This company, from what I read, their satellites had met all the requirements that the government needed, that could be seen and heard, but the government still didn't issue them a permit. So they went to issue to India and launch, and the government said you still can't do that. So the gatekeepers are trying to keep certain people out, and then, unless you get permission, you're already cut out of space. And like Lynette was saying, this space thing is big money. People are looking at it as big money. You know, it's like the way they looked at Africa in the 1817 to 1800s when the Europeans first go to Africa. It's the way that it's a way of wealth and power, and they're trying to keep the door closed as long as possible to as many people as possible. And with the technology changing so fast, it's getting harder and harder to do it.
Yeah. So basically, when you talk about using blockchain with satellites, these cube-based satellites, pico-based satellites, um, as the article mentioned, you had a satellite that's the size of a sandwich. Most guys eat a steak and cheese and don't even think about um, that you just put a satellite in your belly. Um, you just ate a whole satellite. for the most part. Um, so blockchain comes into all of this, to manage the accuracy by using a digital distributed ledger technology that's going to make things immutable so that the information that you get is accurate, not just for your own personal sake, but for actually other agencies that are going to be involved in monitoring all of these devices in space. If you're a blockchain developer, you could actually be a space blockchain developer working on space projects. There's a role for everybody in all of this, which is why we brought this up to begin with. There is no area where you have to be an actual expert. You can be a general contributor to space development and don't even realize that there's opportunities all the way around on this.
Yeah, but the, let's say you and I went into the satellite business. A satellite is just a radio, a transmitter, actually, a transmitter, and you can make it a transmitter and receiver. And from your cell phone, you can operate that satellite in space.
Hmm.
Now, if you can buy a car, you can go to an electronic store
Hmm.
and buy frequency modulators and put them into, I don't know, a shoebox. Let's say a shoebox, and you can have your satellite doing different tests. You can set up your satellite to do 10, 20 different tests in the size of a shoebox. And whenever you want to change your whatever test you want to make, because essentially everything in the universe has a spectrum. Everything, every cell in your body has a spectrum. And if you can uh, operate across every one of those spectrums, you can tell what your red blood cells look like, what they're doing. Your white blood cells look like what they're doing. You can tell if the satellite is if you're looking at this space rock and it's got gold, silver, mercury, whatever metal that you're looking for. You can see that information on your satellite. I mean, on your satellite, you can get the information on your cell phone. So we moving really fast as far as that technology goes. It's not just for downloading information or internet information or that. This thing is bigger than most people can comprehend.
Yep, absolutely. Let me share my screen and get to this next piece. I don't want to spend too much time on some of these links because we'll be here all night, and that's not what the intentions are. Excuse me one second. All right, so sharing my screen right now with NASA. Ever wanted to build your own Mars rover? Well, now you can. Yeah, drag my JPL's open source Build It Yourself rover. We've designed a driving six-wheel rover with almost the same suspension system as the real rovers on Mars, but using only commonly available components that you can easily buy online and assemble in garage. We provided the parts list and build instructions. You provide the hands, brains, and elbow grease to put it all together. Boom! We've been talking about this since day one, since we started this channel. This is actually doable. All these people who were arguing 10 days ago saying that this is pie in the sky, you know, you guys are on crack. The Black Brain Trust is smoking crack. How? Tell me how. NASA put the blueprints up there and said all you need is a little bit of brain power and some elbow grease, and you can buy all the parts online. How's that smoking crack? I know. Can you explain to me how that's smoking crack?
I can't explain to you how they're smoking crack, but I can explain. I can say that the tools are there. With the advent of the internet and YouTube, we have entered an age where if a person choose to be able to learn things at a push of a button, go to a specific websites and learn things there. Now you have the at the onset of open source technology, and you can build things that were once way out of reach for people. It's getting easier to do. So now the only thing that's going to now we're saying that now we're going to see the people who want to and the people who don't want to.
Hmm. D, you have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, a lot of us don't want to unless we have somebody who's going to tell us, go do this. We have to kind of somebody's got to come on the block and say, hey, how you guys would like to work for NASA? Instead of going online and saying, hey, NASA gave us the blueprints, these things. Let me try it. You know, um, some women will have to say, I like guys that work for NASA. Then you're gonna have 50,000 little black guys going to work trying to get a job at NASA. You know, so this is not interesting to us or most black men until some black woman put this on her list of things that are required for a date.
Hmm.
That's my opinion.
And it shouldn't be so much about getting a job at NASA, but creating your own space company, your own space startup. And there's nothing wrong with not turning profit for 5 or 10 years as a space startup. Um, I've talked about this before on other channels that you have to start with the bottom. You got to get them when they're 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. You got to get them when they're 13 years old, when they're going through puberty, and they can actually and they need this sort of physical hands-on attention to keep them focused on the bigger picture. Once you get them into that into that mindset, then what's going to happen is you're going to develop a culture of excellence and a legacy of excellence of passing on ingenuity and innovation that's going to be a benchmark for everybody else to uphold. You can't just have do rags and swag and then think that that's the that's going to be the protocol to work by. A lot of people are afraid of this. They're afraid of these type of discussions because that's going to mean that they have to step their game up. And if they're incompetent, they don't want to have that discussion because it's going to force them to do things that they're incapable of doing. This is going to separate the weak from the strong. This is the real select guys, the real guys who, or the real people, I should say, that are really about something, especially for black men.
Hey, I remember you and Linnell put on a show, I think it's last month, about
Mm.
black inventors. And
February.
the funny thing is, like a lot of those people, a lot of those guys didn't even have a high school education. Some of them couldn't read,
Hmm.
but these guys invented some of the things that we can't do without today, like refrigeration.
Hmm.
So I can't see what is going on with the young people today. You know,
Hmm.
I can't see it.
You know what it is. You know what it is. De is that this is the lost generation. This is the generation that we the previous generation did not hand anything down to. You know, they didn't do enough. like the forebearers did. You know, when coming out of slavery, black people were coming out of slavery, they were building institutions overnight. So slavery ended in 1865 for the most part. By 1868, they were already establishing infrastructure. By 1898, they had their own. The first Black Wall Streets popped up. So you mean 20 years after the most grotesque thing that could have ever happened to human beings, black people were thriving. How is this possible, right? Today, you don't really have that because no one's really passing anything on, and that's why we have to keep having these conversations so that you can get you can at least find a demographic of people that you can tap into from a human capital standpoint and say, this is what's going on, this is what's coming down the pipe, this is going to happen for the next 200 years. So that means all the way into the year 2100, this is going to be a viable market for you, a 200-year game plan that's going to far exceed our grandkids and our great grandkids. And you're going to build that legacy. You're going to be able to pass that on for generation to generation to generation. But when you try to have these conversations in the manosphere, they pretend like, oh, this is this, poppycock. This is this is a cockamamie scheme. This is real. High school and beyond, we design our instructions to be easy to follow by high school students and enthusiasts. How can you complain about that? How can you say that this is crack? The Black Brain Trust is smoking crack. They don't know what they're talking about. I beg to differ. NASA begs to differ. And they said the cost. You can build the rover for less than $2,500. You got guys spending $10,000 on wheels that spin. How is this? Black men have their priorities all mixed up.
The thing is that when you start building these things, that all the changes that you incorporate into it, the price of making this thing is going to come down because you might find material like plastics or that are stronger than the materials that were currently that were used before you started building,
Hmm.
and you can find it cheaper.
Right, right,
So with everybody getting involved in this, it's not only a spread of the technology, but the innovation that's going to come out of it. And
right.
if you're in it and you're part of that innovation, it's like when in the 70s when I first came in, a lot of people were computers are just getting going, and Microsoft, Dell, all those kind of guys, those were the guys who were in somebody's garage playing around with computers, building their own, putting together their own, experimenting with things.
Yep, yep. And that's where it started. It started in the garage, and that's what
Yep.
this is about. Developing that same culture of building in, from the garage. Except in predominantly black neighborhoods, you don't have a garage, right? So you have people who live in apartment buildings subsidized by the government, where whatever have you. So now this goes into my other point that I want to bring up. Let me see if I can share my screen. Give me 1 second. So there's something called makerspace, and what makerspace um, makerspace is basically innovation labs in a box. They have something called a beta box, and a beta box is basically a shipping container that is designed to be a laboratory, a portable laboratory, which is one of the most ingenious things I've seen just this year alone. But the pictures I'm pointing to right here is what is a makerspace? Basically, it's about innovation. It's basically a STEM project, and you could do various things, machine cutting, 3D printing, basic electronics, advanced electronics, soldering, and things of that nature. Working on projects, rovers and drones and robots and all types of things. If you look at this facility right here, this is a makerspace as a summer camp. So laboratories get built, they get funding and things like that. Excuse me. Again, this is another makerspace. Most of these spaces are being propped up in neighborhoods that are not black. So what happens here is that those kids get more advanced, and those become launching pads for these people to actually get into the very markets that I'm talking about. And it doesn't cost a lot of money for these things. Again, another makerspace. There's hundreds of makerspaces all across the country, and even I think there's even one in Africa. I think it might be in Ghana or something like that, maybe Nigeria. Point that I'm making here is like DE was saying about Microsoft and Apple and those companies in Silicon Valley who came out of the garage. A lot of black people don't have garages in their neighborhoods, but you can create one of these spaces that would substitute a garage that you saw Silicon Valley guys developing, 40 years ago. And this would actually be funded by it will be publicly funded, just like a library would be publicly funded, just like your public school systems are publicly funded. One of these maker spaces would be publicly funded in those black neighborhoods, and what that would serve as, again, as I said before, as a launch pad to get these ideas off the ground. You can see in this picture right here, they have 3D printers sitting in front of them. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but that's just to put emphasis behind DE's point. All right, so we talked about NASA space vehicle, Q-based satellites. Um, let's talk about Africa for 1 second. All right, this is from Space in Africa. They actually have a Space in Africa website that focuses on African space development. So a lot of these people who basically said, oh, the Africans are living in huts, they're all, Africoons and all this other stuff. Yeah, that might be true in some places, but for the most part, the continent is moving ahead a lot quicker than African Americans. Be it may be as it may be. So Africa could soon be launching its first satellite from its soil. Commercial space launch service is a rapidly growing subsector on the commercial space industry. The subsector, which is projected to hit $7 billion market size by 2024, includes spaceports, launch vehicles, and navigation services. A spaceport, sometimes referred to as cosmodrome in reference to Russian cosmodromes, or launch site, is a ground-based launch facility for. Uh, they cut it off. Basically, you have to be a member of this site. It's behind a paywall. But the picture that you're looking at here is It's a reference, but they're talking about Kenya. Kenya has used a a oil a oil exploration rig in the Indian Ocean to launch their rockets from. Anybody knows what an oil exploration rig looks like? It's actually a massive size object in the ocean that is used for pumping oil out of the water. However, the rig that they had was actually no longer functional. So rather than tow it around and bring it back to shore and dismantle it, they left it out there to launch rockets from because it's actually big enough to hold a rocket, and the rocket that they will be launching is not that big to be mounted upon there. It's actually a good pedestal to launch it from. So my point in saying this is that you can launch from pretty much anywhere now, and not have to worry too much about the startup costs. So what the Africans are doing is they're leveraging the infrastructure that's already in place to meet their objectives.
Now that is resourceful. Um, we covered before where rockets need to launch from certain areas,
Hmm.
especially to you don't want a rocket to launch in the middle of a populated city. You want to do that away, and for them to have the ingenious thought of saying,
Hmm.
hey, this is rocket, the infrastructure is there already, just launch it from there instead of paying all this money to cut out land. Because when you cut out land to shoot rockets off, it got to be a large area of land. It's it's in the middle of the, well, not in the middle, but it's off in the distance in the ocean. The rig is already there. That's super ingenious, man. I like that.
Yeah. So the image I have up right now that I'm sharing on my screen is the Kenyan rig, and if you look at it, it has the cranes and whatnot that lift up the rocket up to the top, and then it has the launch mechanism or the launch the launch infrastructure in place.
That's pretty cool. That is cool. That's a big rig. And because look at the rocket comparative to the rig itself. That is pretty cool.
Hmm. And if it blows up out there. It doesn't blow up on the ground. Doesn't hurt anybody.
Right, right, right.
But when we talk about this stuff, people think that, oh man, you don't know what you're talking about. This is bunk. This is you guys are smoking crack. How? How are we smoking crack? Explain that to me.
But some people cannot imagine things. You understand? It's just it is like if you put them like say that what you were talking about just now, you can fill a room with machinery
Hmm.
and every kind of material you can put inside there, and just put them in it. Just put people inside there and say, "Hey, I'll be right back." When you put 100 people inside there, and 50 of them are black people,
Hmm.
you're gonna see 48, 49 of that 48 people, black people, on their cell phone chatting with one another, and two black guys you're gonna see walking around looking at the machine, you're trying to make something else something.
Hmm.
All the other people, whether it be Indian or African or Caucasian, you'll see 5 or 10 of them talking, but the rest going to be looking around at whatever is in the room,
Hmm.
trying to make something out of whatever is there. And I've seen experiments like that. Serious, I've seen experiments like that where they put people in a room. Say, yeah, I'll be right back.
They were going to tear down that oil rig. Okay, they were going to tear it down. They were going to remove it until somebody came up with an idea in Africa and said, "Why don't we use it for launching rockets?" Light bulbs went off everywhere and said, "We got to do this." And it didn't cost them anything. In fact, the rig was already paid for. Remember, it was already pumping oil off of it. Once they stopped the the exploration of oil, um, it had already met and exceeded its total cost of ownership. So now they're squeezing way more profit out of it because it's doing more than what it should do. And it's going to be doing that for the next 20, 30 years until they can find something else that, or they can, until they can't no longer use it, right? So leveraging, infrastructure that's already existing, um, leveraging that human capital, that's something that we don't really have, right? A lot of black people are just not focused. And you don't need to be a genius behind all this, right? Um, so that's been my main point. You don't really need to be a PhD graduate. You can do this with a certificate, and I'll get into that in a second. Oh, that's not it. Yeah, this is it. This is it. Now, I talked about this before about abandoning public infrastructure, schools, public schools. Chicago, I think they closed something like roughly 49 schools in Chicago, public schools in predominantly black neighborhoods and stuff like that. That stuff goes on the auction block for dirt cheap. Dirt cheap. The only thing you're paying is the taxes, the back taxes on it. You can convert that sucker in by getting grants, um, use a little bit of elbow grease. There's got to be some brothers in the neighborhood who could swing a hammer and work a drill. There's a lot of opportunities that's going to come out of all of this type of stuff. When people talk about, when we talk about space exploration and asteroid mining, people think that we're talking about building massive facilities and people walking around in white lab coats. You can buy a white lab coat right now for Amazon for $20 or something like that, or $50 or whatever it is. That's nothing. The infrastructure is the main focus of how are you going to leverage this, like the Africans are doing, leveraging old dysfunction, defuncted, decommissioned oil rigs. What about building mini rockets right off the back of an 18 wheeler? A mini rocket might have the height of anywhere between 12 to 15 feet. 18 wheeler is something like 50 feet. You can put that sucker right on the back of it, create a launch mechanism, and you can fire that off in the middle of a desert and never have to worry about establishing any true infrastructure for a launch pad because the launch pad is portable. But see, you got to have that sort of mindset going into this. Got to be able to think and expound upon ideas that are already existing or that need to be put on the forefront. All right, let
Oh,
me get to this next one.
okay, you go ahead.
No, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that the ways in which, as more people get into this industry, first when NASA used to launch their rockets, they used to launch their rockets in this huge Saturn V rocket. It was just humongous. Now you're seeing that get smaller, and not only smaller, but you still have the gravity, but more efficient.
Hmm.
So as the Saturn V rocket is still a humongous rocket, but now they're gonna still the New Glenn by Blue Origin and uh, SpaceX's I forgot the name of it, but I'm just gonna say Big Falcon rocket. They're gonna build huge rockets, but the efficiency is they're gonna go to more distance than just out in the low Earth orbit.
Oh yeah, Leo is just the beginning, right? If you can get past Leo, you're in good hands at that point. You're in good graces. D, you have something you want to add?
No, you guys covered it.
All right. Let me get to this next one. This one is from African News. Space. Again, space in Africa, making the case for African investment in space programs. The first half of the African space strategy, adopted by the African Union in 2016, lays out the ways in which African countries could benefit from space science and technologies. That is pretty fair. That is a pretty fair representation of the reality space communities face on the continent. In any discussion with politicians and policymakers, the first half of a conversation is spent justifying why they should be able, why should they be at the table in the first place. Although the African continent represents about 20% of the Earth's landmass and some of its richest endowment of minerals, it accounts for just a fraction of a percent of global space spend. What this means in practice is that other countries have their foot in the door or are sitting in or are sitting in the space club lounge in comfy chairs, while African countries stand outside and purchase space products for those from those who are reclining in the aforementioned lounge. And a major reason for this is that entrance to the Global Space Club and even crossing the threshold is very, very expensive. The widespread problems of poverty, inequality, unemployment, disease, armed conflict, and political instability in Africa have made the priority uh, given to space in the continent a subject of political debate. Moreover, the cost of space is worrisome given the ratio of foreign aid to public expenditure in Africa. But while we're counting cents, the big players in space are throwing around dollars. In 2014, African civil space program spending was about $185 million dollars compared to the global $42.4 billion. Dollars. Total global expenditure on the space was about $330 billion. Dollars. The largest African spenders were Nigeria, $66 million, dollars, Algeria, $45 million, dollars, South Africa, $31 million, dollars, and Angola, $26 million. Dollars. Those numbers put forward by space market consultancy Consultant, Euroconsult highlight the two things. First, Africa is responsible for a tiny proportion of both civil space spending and global space spending. And second, industry spending dwarfs civil spending, but it does so by building on government investment. Without government investment in space, you don't get an industry that burdens around it. That's the thing that's lagging in Africa, government investment in space. But that said, in 1991, there were no big budget civil space programs on the African continent, according to the European Commission's Eurostat database. Today, though, some African countries are getting in on the space economy. Part of the reason for this is that sub-Saharan Africa's overall satellite capacity use increased 11% between 2009 and 2014, according to Euroconsult. In fact, even the African Union has recognized that the continent needs to start playing in space. In 2016, it adopted a space policy and strategy which laid out first why Africa needed to be part of the space economy, and second, what it needed to do to get there. Africa has rapidly increased its capacity in Earth observation, navigation, satellites, and communications. Sarah Young Agbor, the African Union Commissioner for Human Resources, Science and Technology, said last year. But the recent focus has not been the programs or plans to make the African space economy a reality. Rather, it is who gets to host the African Space Agency. Although the creation of a space agency is not explicitly mentioned in either the policy or the strategy. This is the issue that is getting attention, rather than the governance framework and implementation plan that are in which we are in which are what the space strategy lays out as the next steps for next steps for developing space on the continent. Both Egypt and Ghana have thrown their hats into the ring to host the space agency. Surprisingly, neither South Africa nor Nigeria, both major players in space on the continent, have. Egypt launched its first observational satellite in 2007, but lost communication with it soon after. Its second satellite, EgyptSat 2, was launched in 2014. The country aims to launch its first satellite for scientific research this year. Ghana, on the hand, has been buoyed by the July launch of its first Cube satellite, a tiny 1 kilogram satellite. This was a coffee can based satellite. For those of you who don't know, Ghana launched a coffee can satellite. I think in 2013, and they used a weather balloon to lift it off the ground and get it into space, which is remarkable. I think it only cost them about $60. But there is a fissure between the top level decisions and the work taking place on the ground. We need to be able to launch our own space programs. Habini Mashalini, a senior policy officer in the African Union Commission, told a session on space in Africa at the Science Forum South Africa in Pretoria in December last year. We need the African Space Agency to implement policy. The role of the African Union ends with the development of policy. We need to have a clear implementation plan. However, there are a number of big question marks over this implementation plan and how having a space agency will further the development of space activities on the continent. There are already space programs in a number of countries with significant overlap, something which the African Union Space Agency highlights. I don't want to read too much of this, but I do want to click on this image right here so you guys can see how many space programs are starting to be developed on the continent itself. So um, the majority of the business that's happening in Africa in terms of space development is coming from the universities first, and then it goes down to um, the associations to organizations, and then you got Earth observation institutions, and then satellite communication companies, and then you have your government institutions that back them as the last bastion. So, um, your thoughts on this, Lionel?
Yeah, that's how it forms. You need studying. You need everything that you just mentioned for it to evolve. With on the, pertaining to the African continent, you may not have too many people that are into it, like in other places, but you need a groundswell. You need a what's what I'm looking for. You need a fervor of people who want to get into this, and it starts with the university. You just mentioned how we need to have the children be into this at a young age. That is the first step. First step to get into it at a younger age. You see here in America, you see colleges getting doing these studies on things. That's the way to do it. And people who go on to do these space startups, that's where they get a lot of their information. That's where they source a lot of their talent because they already know. And those people are going to have I don't say a job, but also those same people are going to band together and start startups on that African continent. This is not pie in the sky. This is not none of that. This is actual real stuff.
Mr. DE?
Yeah, what Linda says is correct. But one of the other problems that when develop if the Africans don't step up the game, is that you're going to see Europeans moving into Africa and creating um, spaceports, not only spaceports, but the industry itself. They're going to move into Africa and create the industry. They're going to run the industry, but it's not going to be on Africa's behalf. It's going to be what other people outside Africa determines what was going to happen. And when that happens, it's going to keep the African from creating his own because um, it's like you can pay off the politician. You know, it's like what you just brought up an article there with the SEC going after one company while other companies are launching satellites, and that's what's going to happen if the African Union doesn't move quickly to do that. You'll get people who will move in to say South Africa or Egypt and say, look, we want to create something here, and you're going to vote against the rest of the it being created anywhere else in Africa. You know, when the African Union meets to decide these things, and that's what Caucasian people do. That's what European do. That what America does. They're good at it. They've been doing it for a long time. So Africa got to move. Hello, anybody there?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you. I
Oh,
just fired up another item on the docket. All right, this next one is just an overview of the CanSat technology in Zimbabwe. So looking at this picture right here, basically it is a soda can satellite. So they've been able to develop a satellite out of a soda can or the size of a soda can. Tapping into global technological advancements would also aid. Well, where am I at? Tapping into global technological advancements would also aid the country's industrial agenda as the country strives to attain a middle income economy by 2030. So, App was the president of Zimbabwe, um, Emerson Mnangagwa, as he implored on the nation to take a science and technology based trajectory in order to move at par with the rest of the world. Indeed, in this era, science plays a critical role as as humanity transforms to a new technology informed order. There is no turning back. Honorable Minister Amon is on record stating that the establishment of a space agency is not a drill but is real. Science technology is changing the way we see, do, and think about all things we have known since birth. All we have known is changing at an astounding pace. Does does it mean we become novices all of a sudden? Not really. We have two options to adapt or to think. This article draws you to an innovation in science technology known as CAN satellites and the various benefits it brings forth. The Minister of Higher and Territory Education, Science and Technology Development Minister Aman said establishment of Zingza would take a phased approach. The nation was enlightened that Zimbabwe will build a satellite that will be used as a launch pad for the sustainable development of the country. One of the first phases of in development of the satellite's development can satellites is merely done by secondary schools and tertiary institutions. Can satellite or CanSats is a small and simple satellite that fits in a 350 milliliter can size, 66 millimeter diameter, and 150 15 millimeter height, and has a mass below 350 grams. The idea of CanSat came through discoveries by Professor Bob Twiggs, Stanford University Space Development Laboratory in 1998. He suggested a concept of developing small satellites that fits in a 350 milliliter can and can have a mass below 350 grams. Many would wonder why they should bother themselves with trying to understand CanSats. One would certainly ask which part of their lives can satellites be of relevance. CanSats perform a number of functions, and their missions can be taking pictures, transmitting telemetry, atmospheric missions, video capture, imaging, communication, and or navigation. Satellites have changed human habitation on Earth since the first satellite was launched in 1957 by Arthur Clarke. Satellites have been used for weather, navigation, television, broadcasting, to internet, remote sensing, Earth exploration, education, disaster recovery, and scientific research. Satellites can be used for monitoring and detection of veld fires. In Zimbabwe, it is now commonly agreed that the veld fires are a significant threat to national economic recovery plans, as they destroy not only pastures necessary for restocking exercise, but they also destroy foreign currency generating plantations, as was noted in the Environment Management Agent Report of 2014. So Zimbabwe understands the necessity behind all of this, and putting a lot of emphasis behind this by teaching this stuff in school. So really, it's the high school students that will be the ones developing a lot of this stuff. This is stuff that we've talked about on here, and I've been pushing for the last 10 days on other people's platforms, where you need these sort of innovation labs in every single black neighborhood to actually further the development of this sort of endeavor, and it won't cost you any money at all. The same amount of money that you would use to build a basketball court or a playground could actually be used to develop in a space lab, not a space lab, an innovation lab that can build cube-based satellites, that can build rovers, that can build um, bottle rockets and other forms of rocketry, um, weather-based balloons and telescopes for that matter. Imagine putting a telescope mounted on the rooftop of a innovation lab of maybe a decommissioned school in Chicago. You can actually do things like that. There's a famous satellite um, by Celestron that Lionel likes so much. It's this massive satellite. I wish I had the link to it, but it just puts emphasis behind where the how cheap it is and how cost effective it is to actually get into the industry right now.
Yeah, and we're gonna keep beating that drum. It's not as expensive as it was before, and like we're gonna continue to say, as more people get into it, it's just gonna become cheaper and cheaper because things are gonna become specialized, and yeah, that's gonna get cheaper and cheaper. That's with everything.
All right, so let me pull up the telescope that I was referring to. All right, let me see if I can pull it up now. I'm on the website right now. See if I can filter this out. Mino, do you have a link to the telescope that we were referring to before?
I'm trying. Actually, that's it right there.
This one right here.
Yeah, I believe. No, no, no. It was less one. I'm trying to find it myself. Wrote the name down. I can't remember the name.
I remember it was like 14 grand.
Yeah, it hit this big. There you go. Yeah.
Nah, that's not it. It was, I don't believe that was it though. Hmm.
Trying to
But
look.
it's a good representation of that this telescope can see all the planets that's in our solar system as clear as the Hubble telescope can. That shows you the power of the technology that we have today and the cost that it would take to actually get into it. I mean, for what this telescope costs and the things that it can do, this is cheaper than spinning wheels that these guys have on their cars. These candy paint that they like to throw on their cars. I have no problem dropping 5K on something like this. Although I might need another person to help me lift it because it's a pretty big telescope. But it has recording functions. It can connect to a laptop. It can automatically position itself based on your GPS location. And on a clear night, you can see just about every single planet.
Yeah, those things are pretty big. They're huge.
Hmm. Let me see if I can
Is
pull
that
it
the
up.
one that you can put on your laptop and you can track one area of the sky all night or something like that?
Yeah, if you I've stopped sharing my screen now, but there's a controller that goes with it. Yeah, there's a controller that goes with it. You can dial it in.
Hmm. And you use a program. Can't remember the name of the program because I used it in my astronomy class. I can't remember the name of it, but it'll tell you it's the main program astronomers go, and it'll tell you where all the constellations are and so forth and so forth.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff is open source. There's so many opportunities that can come out of this. I mean, what I'm gonna do is, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take down a list of positions that anybody can get into without a degree for space exploration and planetary science. Um, Blockchain developers, um, mechanics. You can turn a wrench. You can work a drill. You can work a soldering iron. You can be involved in this overnight. Were you gonna say something, D?
Well, you can. People don't realize you had a who was it? You are complex. I think it was even you are complex. You show this guy who was making rockets, and as he go along, he was making changes to his rocket that he can adjust the trajectory. He was making the engine so that the engines would keep the rocket tilted at the right angle.
Yeah, that's a BPS space. He on YouTube. He looks a lot like Elon Musk, but on his last video, he almost stuck the landing of the main rocket coming back to Earth. Well, guiding itself back, he almost stuck it. And yeah, that's BPS space.
Yeah, so it shows you today. Yes, you need a degree to become a lawyer. You need a degree to become a CEO. But a lot of the technology that we use today, you don't need a degree for. And especially with the changing technology, where we were talking tonight in your garage, you can build one, in your bedroom. You can sit down, study this stuff, and build it. You know, when I started studying electronics, it was like 9 to 5 in a classroom every day. You know, and now it's like, man, you can do what I did 30 years ago on YouTube. so so you can study the same thing I studied on YouTube today. Same thing I went through in class, same experiments I did, you could do at home. You know, so it's technology is making a change now that if a lot of people don't get into it, they're gonna get left behind. Our people, especially.
Yeah, I just want to cover this article here where it says converted Russian ballistic missile fires into space with satellite. So they've taken an old missile, an old Soviet-based missile, and turned it into a space rocket, and it actually works very well.
But those things were basically built for low Earth orbit.
Hmm.
They were supposed to go up, deliver 5 or 6 nuclear weapons to 5 or 6 different targets, so they can reach up there. Without
Hmm.
that load on them now, and the satellites getting smaller, they can take that load to almost anywhere outside the Earth's atmosphere.
Right, right. And I remember the Scud missile, if I remember correctly. Let me see if I can find it. Make sure I'm saying the right thing.
The Scud missile can hit Israel from Iraq.
Right, but that's just going, from on the same continent. But
Yeah, but if you got, what was that? Israel to Iraq is what 500 miles?
mm,
You know what I'm saying? So even if you look at the trajectory, you go how far before it starts its descent. So if you go up 100 miles before you start the descent, you still got 100 miles of space, trajectory that you can go up. That missile can take you into Earth orbit.
I think I covered this before. Let me share my screen real quick. This one is about the Scud missile being used as a weapon, as a space launch vehicle. The Scud missiles causing so much anxiety in the world today are Soviet designs that originated in a weapon developed by the Nazis. Scud missiles causing so much anxiety. Scud is a Western term. The names of Soviet weapons where we are familiar with came from the Air Standards Coordinating Committee, a military group founded in 1948 by the United States, Great Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. The committee gave surface-to-surface missiles naming names starting with S, Shyster, Scandal, Skeen, etc. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization later adopted the naming conventions, as did the Soviets, who were secretive that they would often use the Western terms rather than utter the forbidden Russian names. During the Cold War, NATO used Scud to refer to a specific missile, the R-11, a Soviet theater uh, range weapon intended to strike targets in Western Europe. Scuds were manufactured by the Voskin machine building plant from 1959 to 1984. Today, however, Scud is like the Kleenex or in Xerox, brand names that were used to refer generally to all similar products. In this case, the product in any single stage storable propellant military rocket with a range between 186 to 372 miles. So let me do some research real quick on the R11 and the R17.
All right. Hope everybody's having a great show today. We see 22 people watching with 35 likes. That's great. Y'all are learning something. I put a video down in the chat box. It's from CNBC 4 years ago. They talked to one of the employees of uh, I forgot the name of the company, where he talks about everything we talk about. We're saying also. This was 4 years ago. So that video was from CNBC. Yeah, like we said, that a lot of these asteroids, you don't need to go out way out to, I'll say the void, like for a better term, but you can catch them in near low Earth orbit as they come to you.
Right. All right, this next one is from hackday.com. If you are planning on building your own space shuttle, one of the most complicated machines ever built was the U.S. Space Shuttle, technically the STS or Space Transportation System. Despite the title, we doubt anyone is going to duplicate it. However, one of the most interesting things about the shuttle's avionics, the electronics that operate the machine, is that being a government project, there is a ridiculous amount of material available about how it works. NASA has a page that gathers up a description of the vehicle's avionics. If you are more interested in the actual rocket science, just back up a few levels. We will warn you, though, that if you've never worked on space hardware, some of the design choices will seem strange. There are two reasons for that. First, the environment is very strange. You have to deal with high acceleration, shock, vibration, and radiation, among other things. The other reason is that the amount of time between design and deployment is so long due to testing and just plain red tape that you will almost certainly be deploying with technology that is nearly out of date, if not obsolete. A good example of the orbiter's GPC or general purpose computers. There are five of them. At least three have to agree before they do anything. Early versions of GPC use magnetic core memory. That technology was old even when it was put in design, but it was the best way during the design phase to ensure the memory would not be upset by radiation effects. In 1991, a major upgrade did replace the core with semiconductor-based memory. The information on the NASA site is a bit high level, but still detailed. If you want some real hardcore discussions about the shuttle's avionics, the K Labs site lost NASA funding before moving to private web server to remain operational. If you ever wanted to try your hand at programming in HALS, as the shuttle's programmers did, you can get the documentation there. There's also a booklet with a lot of information that you can download from NASA and video overview you might enjoy. While we doubt anyone will be trying to build their own shuttle, this is still a great wealth of information. Of course, the Russians did try back in the day and arguably made a better system. If you do build a copy, there's already a shop manual from Haynes. So, what this is talking about is NASA put the blueprints of the space shuttle on their website, and if you want to download it so you can try to reproduce it, it's there.
And that's great because they gone through the trial and error. The less you have to reinvent the wheel, the better.
Mhm.
You know what's funny about the system, bro? I don't know if you guys have ever seen that shuttle close up, but the thing is about as big as the 737, the old 737-200. The instrumentation in that shuttle, um, what the five instruments that the flight computers, what do you call them, nav flight computers that they have on the flight management computers that you have on there. You can the five of them you can put into maybe three operating cards. Most flight computers today on the airplane, it's got two systems in one box, and the systems that they have today can do more than the five. The one box today can do more than the five on that shuttle. That's all how old the technology is embedded on that craft. And if you look at that, if you are interested in making the system, you can look at what they have on there, and instead of putting five boxes on your mock-up of the shuttle, you can just put one box, which will do what the five boxes on there will do. So it not only if you're interested in something like that, not only will it breed innovation, not only it breed interest, but it breeds innovation because you start thinking about, how can I replace all five of these with something smaller that can do better and is more proficient. And out of all of this comes innovation. That's the one thing that today's technology is doing.
You can actually replace all those parts with a Raspberry Pi.
when you started just now, that came to mind.
Mhm.
Yep.
No, that's the minimum amount of processing power that you would need. Now you
Right.
can probably use the same components from your cell phone, from your iPhone or your Android phone today to actually power up that whole entire system. It wouldn't really cost you much. The last article has been removed, so I'm not going to actually get into that. But I'm going to open this up for open chat so that everybody can ask their questions and throw in the comments um, that they may have. I know a lot of people were commenting before on this, and they were saying that this is a cockamamie scheme. The Black Brain Trust is smoking crack. It's not possible. Why waste your time doing this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We see Alhamdulillah, sitting in the chat. He was one of the
Oh,
biggest critics of this whole discussion. I'd like to see what he has to say now, and some of the naysayers.
I don't know. My opinion is that um, we have to educate. We have to somehow take the young children. We got to capture their imagination, not let somebody else capture their imagination. Right now, their imagination is being captured by games, you know, um, cell phone. Everybody wants, you go like my son. I watch my son get up in the morning before he takes a shower, picks up the phone, start texting. He's on his way to school. Teacher calls me. Hey, Isaiah is using his cell phone in class. That's the kind of situation that we have to deal with today as with our children. And
Yeah,
we gotta recapture our children's mind. It's not that the cell phone is bad, but they don't looking at this thing in their hand as a knowledge base. They're looking at it as a communication, and that's it. Something to play
yeah,
games with, and that's it.
Yeah, you need structure. You need to know when I get up, and you gotta actively have a structure where you when you get up in the morning, you say, I'm going to do this first before I even touch my phone or do this. You got to have that type of structure, that daily structure.
Like Mike was saying, those Chicago schools that being closed. Somebody in Chicago has to have the will to say, look, we're gonna take one of these schools and we're gonna open a lab, and you come in and you do experiments on flight, you do experiments on computers, you do experiments on, you know, it might be even trading. You come in and learn how to trade Bitcoin, stocks, whatever. Medical experiments. You can put a lab in there and teach the kids how to experiment on things. You don't have to have dangerous, even cancer cells or red blood cells. You see how it operates and see how the body makes changes. And all the fields that are changing now, they should have some kind of after school program in one of those schools that bring children in.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. I think it's just a lack of unwillingness or a lack of a willingness to do to get this type of stuff to bring this type of stuff to the forefront. Everybody wants to focus on gender politics, and what happens with gender politics is it becomes a sideshow from what really needs to be discussed.
Yeah, agree. Yeah, agree. It's a lot of sideshows.
Hmm. I'm saying from the public discussion portion in local politics on YouTube in the manosphere, people aren't going to have this conversation because they don't see the viability in it. Um, we've been trying to have this conversation for a whole year, for almost a year now, and you still have people trying to say, well, that's a crock of horse shit. And I say, how? We just read almost 2 dozen articles about Africa having the need to get into space exploration. Just read articles about Australia investing into space exploration and actually being a driving force behind it. China, we know China is a major player in space exploration right now. Um, Russia has always been a major player in this. So you see the tide shifting in a way that hasn't really that has skipped largely skipped over black culture. It has basically leapfrogged any of the grievances of reparations and everything else. This conversation is going right over all of that, traverses all of that. And I see we have a dissenting voice in the chat that says, "I can't wait to hear about the $1 trillion asteroid. Can y'all get it?" Lionel, do you have a link to the article discussing that?
Yeah, I'll show it again. Again, that CNBC post, which is the most recent one. And if you don't believe me, we have Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's an astrophysicist, and he backs up. Hey, the first trillionaire. Let me get to this article. The first trillionaire will be come from asteroid mining. He understands it. Let me post this in the chat. And this is a CNBC international TV article, you video from October 12th, 2015, that talks exactly about what we're talking about. And as a matter of fact, in the post that,
Hmm.
and as a matter of fact, in the video, the person that works for the company, something resources, planetary resources, the reporter from CNBC, he hands her a piece of asteroid that's iron because, like I said, actually, you know what? The also let me put in that um, NASA article that talks about the iron and nickel that's in these asteroids. But he gave it to her in her hands, and her expression was like, "Wow, this is heavy," and he was saying that that is from an asteroid that is iron and nickel. We've stated plenty of times. You know what? I'm not even going to explain to these guys. If they want to sit here and waste their time, I have no. You know, I'm to be honest, I'm done with them, man. I'll post a NASA article, but I'm not about to explain myself to these guys.
You got people who live in America. I mean, one of the most technologically advanced countries on the planet. They see what's happening here. They know how life is, how the government here operates, how the people operate, how the businesses operate. And these idiots are going to try to tell you that, yeah, Elon Musk is going to space so he can provide good internet service. What kind of crackpot could be thinking something like that? I mean, this person's got to be a real idiot. These people don't go to provide, they're going out there to make money. If unless they knew that they were going out to be able to make a big, a huge, not even big profit from space, they would not do it. They will stay here and oppress the people on planet Earth, just like they have been doing it for so how long, however long it is. That's what they would do. When it was when we were in the farming in the age when people make money from cotton and sugar, guess what these people were doing? Um, the railroad came along and he started going into mechanical industries. Guess what they were doing? They were making railroad. When America turned into a service industry, guess what these people were doing? They were into the service industry that made the most money. Now they found that in space you can make money, and that's what they're going after. It's not about oh we sending satellites out there to provide good internet or internet around the planet. Please,
Mm-hmm. I wanted to I wanted to bring this up because I didn't want want to make sure we didn't forget about this. EDX EDX has many certificate programs on space and technology. Um, and Lionel brought up Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's an astrophysicist. They actually have an astrophysics program on here that's accredited. It costs $180. It's 9 to 10 weeks per course. 3 hours per week is required. Um, 4 courses. So what you'll learn an understanding of the biggest unsolved mysteries in astrophysics and how researchers are attempting to answer them. Methods used to find and study exoplanets. How scientists tackle challenging problems about white dwarfs, novae, supernovas, neutral stars, black holes, and how quantum mechanics and relativity help explain these objects. How astrophysicists investigate the origin, nature, and fate of our universe. So here you have greatest unsolved mysteries of the universe. Astrophysics, exploring exoplanets. Uh, Astrophysics, the violent universe. Sounds like the manosphere. Astrophysics, cosmology. Uh, and it costs $80. And right now, if you look at the top, it says 20% off.
I have an article from Neil deGrasse Tyson. Well, a video from Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm going to post
Hmm.
in the chat. He talks about asteroid mining and becoming a trillionaire, and
Could you
it is from Fox News.
could you read? Could you share your screen and actually read that?
Well, it's a video. It's a video.
Oh, it's a video. It's a video. Okay.
Yeah, from
Just drop it in the chat.
yeah from Fox News. Fox News.
Hmm. Hmm. So for less than a pair of Jordans, you can get an actual certificate in astrophysics. That involves all of this type of stuff. A lot of people think that you got to have a PhD, you got to go to MIT, you got to go to Harvard, um, got to go to Stanford or something like that. Nope, don't have to. Ayo is asking in the chat. I'm really interested in blockchain development. Got any links? We did a whole hangout on this a few weeks ago with Lionel. Lionel had a whole entire hangout on this.
Yeah, there's a lot of links. That oops. Um, I put a lot of the links in the description of where you can go to get to learn more about it. One of them is the Blockchain Council. You can go there, and they have plenty of certifications and learning videos. And also, go ahead.
Right. We also did a Black Tech Talk. So go back to April, and you'll see. No, not April, May, and you'll see that we did a whole entire Black Tech Talk on blockchain. So re-listen to that whole entire video that Lionel did, and it'll point you in the right direction. I mean, that's why we do all these deep dives on Saturday for exactly the question that you ask. I'm really interested in blockchain development. Got any links? Well, we did a whole entire hangout on these things. So, no, it should be Black Tech Talk blockchain, Black Blockchain Summit, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the description
Hmm.
right now. And this is the link to the show. Boom. Oh, hold on. There you go.
Yeah, I mean these dissenting voices that say, "Well, can you get the asteroid? Can you mine the asteroid, Black Brain Trust? Can you go out there and actually get an asteroid?" Well, we're not actually a mining company, and nor are we a space and exploration company. That's not our role. Our role is to disseminate information as it comes across our table. So once we disseminate the information and put it in layman's terms and relate it to how Black people can actually benefit from this, I mean, it's up to Black people on whether or not they want to get involved in this. Do you want to learn more about this? Well, um, you say you need experts. We beg to differ. We just read several articles where people who don't even have a background in planetary science or space exploration are actually getting involved in this right now as we speak. And in fact, they're developing technology that circles all around this. So I'm kind of baffled at people who say, you know, Black Brain Trust. How come you guys aren't, where's your laboratories? Where's your mining firm? Or where's your mining operations? Why would we have a mining operation? I mean, unless you're talking about crypto mining, I mean that's a different story. But if you're talking about asteroid mining, why would we have one?
See, the same people who ask questions like that, they will go to Harvard or Princeton, pay the professor to teach them whatever they're going to learn.
Hmm.
and they won't ask him that question.
Mhm.
Where's your company that your economics teacher? Where's your economics lab? They won't ask him that question.
Mhm.
They believe that the education he gives them, the knowledge he gives them, is going to benefit them when they get out of school.
Right.
Come here, and it costs nothing, and we show you the proof. Hey guys, this industry is growing. This is what is happening. Urge you to get it. Look into it, and if you like it, go do it. Don't wait. If you got children, guide your children into this because it is the future. Then they're gonna come and ask questions. Why you guys?
Well, you know what it is. Um, they don't see any value in what black men are discussing, even when it's legitimate. And because you don't see any value in what black men are discussing or black men, period, then what happens here is, you begin to reject and project a lot of the disinterest and dissatisfaction in what needs to be discussed. Now, see, if we were, bashing black women, we would have like a thousand people watching this right now. But because we're talking about something that's more meaningful, the dissenting voices want to come in and make it seem like, oh, you guys are just talking poppycock.
If we were black bashing black women, they wouldn't come in and ask, "Well, why you bashing black women?" They'll come in and say, "Yeah, yeah, yeah."
Hmm. Yeah, they love it. They love that stuff. They always want to make it seem like, what we see, what we're saying is incredible. And I'm like, look at the docket in the description beneath the video. All of these are links to actual everything that we're talking about. That confirms everything that we're talking about. Even the Africans are on board, right? The Africans are on board 100% with this. I'll bet the African Union is kind of mismanaging it. They're still on board, state wise and people wise. They're still on board with it.
See, the funny thing is that you present, you will do a presentation, and you say, "Look, guys, I got this article from the Wall Street Journal. I got this article from the New York Times. I didn't get this. This article didn't come out of my brain. I didn't sit down and write this myself. The New York Times is supposed to be a reputable publication.
Hmm.
They are saying this is what's going on. Jeff Bezos built the biggest cloud computing system on the planet. Huh? That's what they're saying.
Hmm.
So if Bezos did it, mean that there's a reason why he did it. He did it to make money, and he wouldn't get into that unless there was a need for it. Somebody's using those computers. Somebody's using that storage. You know, he's selling capacity, but nobody's looking at that. They're looking at that you presenting the article and question you about the article instead of saying, "Hey, this is." I mean, it's like people hate to use their brain for anything except to be to knock other people down. Not only other people but other black men like themselves.
Hmm. All right, let me see if I can pull one of these things up right now and then I'll give my closing thoughts, and then we will close out of this.
You see that question is crypto mining still profitable?
That's a Lionel question.
It depends on what you're mining. Um, you have to understand you're going against if you mine it from your PC, you will have to go into a mining pool. If you're mining Bitcoin, because you have these people with all these ASIC miners. It depends on what you're mining. If you're mining like the top coin, you might not get the what is it, the 12, yeah, the 12 Bitcoin, of finding the block. You may not get that, so you'll have to go into a mining pool to get a fraction of something. So yeah.
Yeah, let me give my closing thoughts because the link I provided in the chat. Actually, let me. Jordan Bevel ask what you guys think of all the empty office buildings around the USA. It's an interesting question, but I don't know if that has anything to do with what we're talking about tonight. We're talking about space exploration and asteroid mining. I don't know if, how office space, empty office space, and buildings around the USA has anything to do with tonight. But my closing thoughts are this, man. Given the amount of information that has been shared, and the I just got sidetracked. Given the amount of information that has been shared tonight, this is just a rehash of what we discussed previously. This isn't new. This is actually old stuff that we had already discussed on previous hangouts. I just consolidated a lot of it and put it inside the docket, just to go over it again because the last week and a half people have been, challenging us and saying all these, you know, having these ridiculous responses to what we talk about and made it seem like we didn't know what we were talking about. In reality, we were actually speaking. Um, we was really speaking um, from a position of opportunity. We see this as a viable market, and that's why um, we had to have these hangouts. Some people were saying, well, how come you guys don't have an engineering firm? And where are the black engineering firms? Well, guess what? Before you can even have a black engineering firm, you got to have discussion around this at the ground level. You have to have people buy-in first before you have business buy-in first. Uh, if you don't have people buy-in, it's never going to work because you're never going to have the steady um, stream of human capital to come in and actually help build this operation off the ground. DE mentioned earlier in the hangout that Silicon Valley was born out of the garages in SoCal, and the issue with black people is that they don't even have a garage to begin with. So how do you even get them to how do you create the next Silicon Valley? Um, for black people. Well, you gotta build the Silicon Valley inside these neighborhoods. And you gotta utilize um, these maker spaces, these maker labs inside these predominantly black neighborhoods. They don't have to be massively built labs. They just need to be sizable enough to perform the operations necessary that would allow that sort of innovation to come out. Um, so the basic math that would the basic cultural intelligence is that complex design. There's a lot of feedback coming from UDE. Complex, innovative ideas come out of complex conversations, and if black people aren't having these complex conversations, nothing innovative is going to come out of it. So you gotta start at the ground level by having the conversation first. Once you entertain the conversation, then you can expound upon some of these ideas, so that we can actually have a more fulfilling dialogue. It's impossible to have a dialogue about building black engineering firms if you don't even have a basic concept of what it even means to be involved in space development or space exploration or planetary science or asteroid mining for that matter. The asteroid mining comes after the fact, but you got to have a conversation on the ground that entails what we're discussing right now. It has to happen. You can't just say, well, that's too big of a leap to talk about space exploration. How? How? When NASA put the blueprints on their website, it says you can download this and do it for less than three racks. Some of the stuff is free. You can download the space shuttle right now. You can build your own space shuttle if you had the resources to do so. But it gives you an idea of what's available and what the opportunities are. So that's why we have these hangouts. That's why we bring it up on other people's channels. That's why we back it up with dockets in the description beneath the video, and that's why we stand firm in our position that we not it's not about what we believe, it's what we can prove. Other people who have dissenting voices can't who say that what we say is poppycock. Well, you gotta prove that we're wrong. We provided our sources. You provide yours. Lionel, go ahead and with your closing thoughts.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. We're giving you everything that we research. We're telling you this is what's on the horizon. The receipts and the sources we're sourcing our information from are reputable government places, are reputable businesses, and reputable newspaper articles that tells you what's going on. These we're sourcing our information from the top and giving it to you. So how can you sit there and say no and deny it? What? But yeah, I don't. Yeah, it's difficult. You can't lead a horse to the water. Well, you can't make the horse drink the water. You can only give it the information. Yeah,
In every discussion that goes on the Black Brain Trust, there's somebody in that article that's brought up says, "Hey, this is what we're doing. This is how we are doing it. This is why we are doing it, and this is how much it costs us to do it." Now, when you come to Brain Trust and you see that information and you just look at it as an entertainment, you go home and you don't even bother to think about it after the presentation is finished. That's up to you. You know, nobody's going to hold your hand and come and say, you know what, here's the fork, put your fork in your hand, and then feed you. It's up to you. You know what I'm saying? Because you're now adult. That's what you have to do. Now, if you got to think about it because it's going to affect your children. If you don't want to think about it, then your children are not going to think about it because you're not going to guide them. And that's going to be the end of your generation. Your name, your manhood is going to die there. Somebody else is going to take over your children's mind and your children are going to become what somebody else wants. So it's up to you to take what you learn, what you hear, think about what is going on. And the future is, if you got children, they are in your house. That's your future. That is your future. You might not think about it that way, but that is your future. Your children are your future. They are you replicated yourself in your children. So it's up to you when you leave Black Brain Trust tonight to think about all that you heard, whether you can help yourself or your children to benefit from it. That's my opinion.
All right. With that being said, thank you all for joining us. Please hit the like button if you have not already done so. Share the video if possible. And the docket and description be the video for your reference of some of the articles that we discussed tonight. And with that being said, we are out.